Are you feeling good today?
Yeah, and it is also dark,
It is dark.
which I'm a little sad about, but I'm not sad because it means when I get out of work, I don't immediately want to go to bed.
Did you notice that the Oregon legislature is trying to pass, or they're considering to pass, permanent daylight savings time?
I heard that. I've heard that in a couple different places.
I
And
think Washington is already also a little further forward, and that would be weird if Washington had it and we didn't, and like you crossed the river and
Yes.
the time changed,
Yes,
which happens in other places around the country.
It does, yeah, it does. But I have my best friend lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, and they have native land, and they can never. She's like, she's like,
I never know what time
I
it
drive
is.
onto the next block, and all of a sudden it's 3 hours later or whatever.
Just use the sun.
Just use the sun, people. That's it. That's my campaign. We got to go back to using the sun.
I had a pretty nuts, not pleasant week, but I don't know if you know Hal Blaine, the drummer, the master drummer of the 60s pop era.
I don't.
He died, and I put together a nice little playlist for it, and I'm hoping to
Oh.
get Joey to maybe play some during the hour. There's stuff that you like absolutely know.
What did you?
Mamas and the Papas,
Oh,
Jan and Dean,
goodness.
Frank Sinatra, Nancy Sinatra,
Was he?
Fifth Dimension.
Is he like one of the part of the Wrecking Crew, or was
Exactly.
He?
He's the drummer for the
awesome.
Wrecking Crew.
Oh, I
so
mean,
he's
how
on
sad.
a zillion.
Oh, I was
awesome,
like,
awesome,
cool.
awesome. I know what you're
Oh.
talking about, right? And
Yeah.
oh dear, that's terrible. He was 91, so he lived a fairly full life. But
Yeah.
it's incredible how many songs that that he's been on. Jan and Dean and
Sure.
Elvis, Frank Sinatra, both That's Life and Strangers in the Night. So definitely songs you know. Anyway,
I've always listened to Strangers in the Night and thought, man, these drums are epic.
well, he has when you put all the songs together, there's a real pop to the snare, and it's a very simple sound. It's usually just your standard 1, 2, 3, 4. But the
That's very good.
well, I'm a drummer. The snare is like this boom. It's
yeah.
a real tight gunshot kind of
Sure.
going off in all the songs that he does.
I love it. Well, I think it was awesome that you put together a playlist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get to it. See if I can sweet talk Joey.
Yeah, I love it.
We threw in some happy talk because the first story is a serious bummer. Am I leading with it, or are you going with it?
Oh, I'll take it.
Take it away.
This is how we're like so excited to do the news, and then we're like, oh.
It's ugly medicine.
It really is. Well, so our top story today is that 49 people are dead and at least 20 others are injured after a terror attack in Christchurch, New Zealand. 2 mosques were attacked yesterday during afternoon prayer. One male in his 20s has been arrested and charged with murder. 3 others have been detained. At least one of those detained is said to be Australian. None of them were on any active terror watch lists. Authorities said that they recovered several firearms from the crime scenes. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said this.
Clear that this is one of New Zealand's darkest days. Clearly, what has happened here is an extraordinary and unprecedented act of violence. Many of those who will have been directly affected by this shooting may be migrants to New Zealand. They may even be refugees here. They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us. There is no place in New Zealand for such acts of extreme and unprecedented violence, which it is clear this act was.
In the wake of the attacks, mosques have been urged to close their doors. There are reports that the accused murderer live-streamed his atrocities online. Authorities said they are working hard to remove the content.
That was a powerful clip, the way she said that they are us, that
Yeah.
she made no attempt to distance themselves from the perpetrators, that they are part of us, and it's something that we all have to bear as a tragedy. So
Absolutely.
I thought that was very interesting.
Absolutely. I don't think there's room for any other kind of rhetoric from a political leader
You
in
would
these
think,
times.
and then there's our country, or there's our current leader at least,
Right.
And it wasn't reported in your rundown, but I did also understand that there was a 73-page manifesto that was one of the killers released, and has lots of references to Trump or American
Wonderful.
conservatism or the rise of fascism. And as I understand, it was reported he was, quote, inspired by Breivik, the shooter in Norway from a few years ago. So that's a gift that keeps on giving.
It's such a strange time to live in. I have so many feelings about this.
Right.
This is, I mean, I know it gets said after every shooting like this, but you know, we're building a wall to keep people out, and the most dangerous people are the ones that live right here and have this sense of entitlement that nobody should be sharing their space. And that's why it's so important that, you know, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, to say something like, you know, this is all
an
of us.
Inclusive message in that sense, in a time of horror, and that's maybe the best thing to take away from is if you or should you have friends who are Muslim, they're probably going to be fairly fragile today. Just offer them a little bit of comfort and let them know, you know, that you understand the pain that the community is going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's all of our jobs to speak up about that and be vocal about the fact that, you know, that's an attack on all of us, whether you're Muslim or not.
That's true.
You know,
and whether it's halfway around the world or not.
Right, absolutely. Because
so did this happen yesterday or 2 days ago or next Thursday, or I'm not sure with the time change how New Zealand works.
I see what you did there. No, I actually have no idea.
It's scheduled to happen in 2 weeks. Apparently, they're just a little bit ahead of us
with
on the time clock.
Back in
Sorry,
time.
It's so depressing. I had to kind of take some kind of edge off there.
No, I appreciate. I'm going to Australia in a couple of months, and in order to buy the tickets, I had to have somebody explain it to me like 15 different times. I was like, okay, so I'm leaving on Friday and I arrive on Thursday. And they're like, it's very
if you
confusing.
keep doing that, you get an extra like year off your life. You know, some people just keep living longer and longer because they're flying back and forth and saving the hours.
Yeah, it's the closest we're getting to time travel. I love it.
Speaking of time travel, let's go into the black hole of idiocy that is Congress. However, we had some weird confluence of the stars, and 12 Republicans saw fit to join. Well, and I know why, and I'll say why later. They joined every Senate Democrat to block Trump's border emergency declaration. A Democratic-controlled House also passed the measure last month. Republican Senator Jerry Moran said, quote, "I believe the use of emergency powers in this circumstance violates the Constitution." I don't know if that's what he sounds like.
I was like, was that like
that's a senator voice?
Direct?
Right?
Oh, okay.
It's like, you know, one of the sort of a Simpsons or a Bugs Bunny era type, you know, senator.
Sure,
big, balding,
nowadays they sound
guy.
Slightly more like a turtle, but continue.
Yeah. I can't do turtle. He said Trump's declaration, quote, "continues our country down the path of all-powerful executive, something those who wrote the Constitution were fearful of." That's not a good sentence construction, but I know what he's saying. After the Senate voted to block Trump's self-declared emergency yesterday, the president quickly vowed to veto, with a tweet that I recall just said veto in capital letters. At least he spelled it right. Later in the day, the House voted on a resolution to make Robert Mueller's findings public. This vote was remarkably bipartisan. 420 representatives, no pun intended, voted in favor. None voted against. 4 Republicans voted present. The resolution is not legally binding, and that's why 420 representatives voted in favor. Currently, Mueller is only required to give his full report to the Attorney General. Then the AG must give notice to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, simply letting them know that the investigation has ended. Democrats have vowed to subpoena the Mueller report if it is not given to them freely. So anytime you see a bunch of Republicans voting for something, you know it's not legally binding or it's not going to cost them any skin. So that's what
is the point of voting on it if it's not legally binding?
It's a sense of the Senate. It's a sense of the Congress. You know, it says, we think this even though it doesn't really have any pull other than we're expressing our, you know, bodies do that all the time. Like City Council here has, you know, made proclamations about, you know, we don't support Trump or, you know, we're on this. It's kind of a, you know, a sense of the body is they want to get out there and make a political statement about, and that's what this is they're making cover. I think the Republicans
sounds like
because they know he's going to veto it. They knew that from the start. They told him not to make the declaration,
right? And
he said, you know, forget it, and I'm going to veto it anyway. And they said, okay. So this is the kabuki that we're treated to.
It reminds me of the Kavanaugh hearing. And Jeff Flake, who was like, we need to stand up for our moral principles. And then you're like, oh, okay, are you going to vote with their moral principles? And he's like, no.
Not so much.
But we need to stand up for them. You're like, okay, well, yes, thank you so much for using your power for something good. Yeah. This is, I guess it makes sense if they're voting for something that nobody has to hold them accountable to.
Do you have Beto fever?
No.
Okay. I don't either, but
oh, that's funny. Yeah, when I was reading through these last night, I was like, I remember there was one that I wanted to skip, and I couldn't remember this morning which one it was, but I think it's that one.
It's that one?
I don't care.
Well, we're going to talk to Mr. Squitieri in a bit, but let's roll through this one.
Sure. Not to say that I don't care about Beto O'Rourke, but I don't understand why he's getting.
It's a good one to squeeze in.
Yeah, sure. So Beto O'Rourke has declared intentions for a 2020 bid. Many commentators have labeled O'Rourke as a charismatic middle ground Democrat. He announced yesterday that he will be running in the 2020 presidential campaign. The former Texas congressman nearly beat Ted Cruz in his 2018 Senate race. Unlike other candidates like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, or Jay Inslee, O'Rourke has not yet put out any signature policy proposals. He spent much of yesterday in Iowa meeting with voters and plans to continue to do the same over the next few days. While in the Texas State House, O'Rourke voted more conservatively than national Democrats. And some have criticized the fact that he took campaign money from oil lobbyists. After announcing his candidacy, President Trump criticized the way O'Rourke... Oh boy. President Trump criticized the way O'Rourke moves his hands.
Yeah, I thought that one too. Yeah.
I gotta get better at reading sentences and not letting them trip me up when
it's
they're
okay.
completely
Once he's
ridiculous.
out of office, this fun house of reality will go away.
It's true. And then what will we laugh at?
Well, we'll be able to read the news without cracking up in the middle.
I just want to clarify here. I have nothing against Beto O'Rourke except for that he is absolutely more of the same that we have had for the last 2 centuries. So I don't understand why people are particularly excited
middle
about
ground
him.
Democrat's a pretty good way to describe him because he almost literally has no policy positions that except I'd like to be somewhere between this one and this one.
I'd like to be whatever
it's an ideology
you
of
need to be.
centrism for the sake of being centrist.
Yeah, which is just like
people aren't like that. People that go, well, my view on this is whatever's halfway between, what my neighbors think. Nobody has that opinion, right?
Right, exactly.
They actually have an opinion one way or the other. They're not, well, I'm between what other people want to do.
And I just feel like at this point in history to be a centrist Democrat, I mean, I understand the concept of maybe it'll bring people together because maybe there are Republicans that can rally around someone if he's more central. But I think it is a total waste of our time. That is not the path of history that we are on, and I'm over it.
538, the political site has him at 30% voting with Trump in his House career, which should disqualify you for any kind of office. But
Amen.
Certainly the Democratic primary. We have the wonderful Tom Squitieri on the line from Talk Media News. Is that correct? I believe that is correct.
That is correct.
How are you today?
I'm wonderful, as you said.
Let me mention first that
you're broad the definition.
You're made possible today by our sponsor, Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Beth Ernest's team of real estate brokers have been serving the Portland area for over 22 years, specializing in residential real estate, lots and land. More at bethernest.com. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but
Well,
I always like to be. It's always always flattering to hear that. I'm sure they don't particularly say we want Tom Squitieri, but I'll accept it that they do.
Oh man, we dig us some Squitieri.
Well, I think that Robert O'Rourke, that is his name, and one of my little things that I've done because I have sometimes, as my son likes to remind me, a interesting sense of humor, as he puts it. I like to call these politicians by their full names, and it just sort of, throws them off when you ask a question about that.
That's an interesting trick.
So what an ironic Senate race it was where Beto and Ted Cruz both ran under other names.
That's right. There you go.
And the opposite of their, opposite style.
I was fascinated by that race, and I think I have a couple quick thoughts, if I may share it.
Sure.
He gave Cruz a good run for his reelection. I think there was a kind of a race like the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump race in that a lot of people voted for Trump who didn't like Hillary Clinton. And I think a lot of people voted for O'Rourke who didn't like Ted Cruz, not just because they liked O'Rourke. So casting your future on those results may be not as wise as you could think. But then again, I could spin it the other way. There's a House member from Texas years ago who almost won a Senate race, didn't, and he went on to become president of the United States. That was George Bush, the first one. So, be losing a race does not disqualify you. Bill Clinton lost his first race for the U.S. House, became governor and president. So the world works in mysterious ways sometimes.
Richard Nixon lost the presidency in 1960 and the governorship of California in 62, and then magically appeared 6 years later.
Yeah, even though he promised not to let himself be around to be kicked around anymore.
That's right. Well, he wasn't kicked around for that point for another
there you go.
3.5 to 4 years. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting week for President Trump. I think, he has faced 2 bad votes in the Senate, or good votes, depending on your perspective. But from he lost the vote on the wall emergency. He lost the vote on Yemen. He'll veto both of those eventually. He's at the Pentagon in about 30 minutes from now. He's supposed to come over here with Vice President Pence for a meeting that had been scheduled a few weeks ago with the top Pentagon officials, as we use in the jargon. And it's going to be interesting. They're meeting. I know you guys, like this sort of inside stuff from the Pentagon hallways.
Absolutely.
They're meeting in a place called the Tank, which is right off the entrance, main entrance center. It's the most secure, soundproof, bug-proof room in the Pentagon. That's where all the meetings, these top meetings, are held. The whole section of the Pentagon is closed off now already to prepare for the president's arrival. There's a lot on their plate: ISIS, North Korea antics, the wall funding, how fast that funding can get to the wall before the courts intervene. Mm-hmm. Lots to talk about.
So they fully believe that they'll be able to squeeze the money out before the door shuts on them, the legal door, so to
indeed.
speak.
Yesterday, Secretary Shanahan came under intense pressure and criticism for his inability to provide a list of possible projects where the money will be shifted from. These are military construction projects. Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island demanded a list by the end of the day. I don't know if it was delivered or not. But once that money is ready to be transferred and goes through the bureaucratic checklist at the Pentagon, it could be transferred at any time because, remember, President Trump's emergency declaration is still in effect. It's the law. It hasn't been blocked by Congress because he has to sign that legislation, which, of course, he will not. It has not been blocked by a court. They can transfer that money right away.
It's still, after 2 years, hard to take the things that he says seriously, but I suppose you're right. We are still in an emergency state.
Would it, if the money were appropriated and then courts deemed to block it, would they be able to retroactively halt the process, you think, or?
That's a good question, and here's my response to it. As I've been able to figure out, the wheels can turn quickly or slowly. Okay, so you have a project. Let's just take it away from the wall for a moment. They're going to build a new dining facility at a military base,
or at Mar-a-Lago.
There's $100 million, let's say, for that project that's sitting in the bank vault or wherever they keep the money for that project. If that money is not spent and a court intervenes and say you can't spend that money for this project, then that money stays frozen. Okay. If the contract is already let, in other words, given to, and the construction starts, they could probably stop the funding in mid-construction, but that would be a different circumstance then. And I don't know the legalities of that.
And then the contractors can sue for breach of contract, and yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, that's
a little bit more complications then.
What else? What about the Mueller vote? What kind of impact do you think that will have on anything?
Well, you saw the outrage in tweets. That's always a good indication of concern of what that'll have.
At least the panic threat level at the White House. Yeah. Exactly.
The tricky thing is how much of that report will not be blacked out when it's sent to Congress in the public forum. So what they release may not be the entire report. And, of course, what Attorney General Barr decides to send to Congress is also in question. You don't know how much of what Mueller's report given to Barr he will provide to Congress. So there's, once again, there's all these different steps that can or cannot be taken that could, in my words, thwart the whole public viewing of what Mueller has come up with.
Right. Is the value in the report or the indictments that come from the report, do you think?
I think both. I think both, because even a report that is blacked out in part, give reporters and others opportunities to pursue what was in it, including members of Congress. The Democrats now control the House, stating the obvious. In their hearings that they will certainly have on the report and related matters, that'll be a good roadmap for them. The indictments are always a good roadmap, of course, because we're seeing action by Mueller to what he and his team have discovered. I mentioned this on the show, I believe, last week, but I believe it's worth repeating that just think what happened with Manafort. He was sentenced again this week for other crimes. Immediately after the sentences, he was indicted in the Southern District of Manhattan in New York for alleged crimes. Southern District of New York is going to be part of the end game in all this, I project.
That's still a federal court, though, right? Southern District?
No, sir. That's
a state court.
federal court, but you could be also indicted
on state
in the
charges.
State level, which is what Manafort does, which importantly removes the opportunity of a presidential pardon.
Right, it's non-pardonable because it's a state crime.
It's a state, exactly.
Now, Cuomo, I guess, could pardon him.
He could.
There's not really any rationale to do so, but Cuomo's done weirder things.
That would be a news story, wouldn't it? There's what we wouldn't have seen coming.
That's right. Anything else for us today?
I think that's it. I think it's a pretty good day. You know, I'm anxious to see what happens. You know, the other thing I will say this is that, you know, Patrick Shanahan's the acting deputy defense secretary. We may see an announcement maybe today that he's going to be nominated for the job after this meeting. We'll see. There's a lot going on in the world that
right.
with ISIS and stuff that, you know, it's a maelstrom right now, and we keep getting diverted by presidential antics.
Right.
And there's a lot that we need to keep our eye on.
Since you're at the Pentagon, is there any discussion of the Christchurch shooting and in terms of national security implications?
No, not really, not yet. I mean, you know, people mostly are just like every other citizen, aghast at what happened, and the fact that it was live streamed really is troubling to individuals at Pentagon, like anywhere else.
And I guess, of course, since it looks like it might be a kind of a white supremacist sort of deal, that the typical figures manufacturing outrage in Washington are going a little bit silent because there's nothing to talk about in that vein.
That's right.
Thank you very much there, Tom Squitieri. Talk Media News, brought to you by Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Thank you very much. You too.
Bye.
They've got lots of land at BethErnest.com. I did the close right over top of him before saying goodbye. That was the worst professionalism I can muster this morning.
That's it. Yeah, that's the reason.
I should say thanks again, Tom, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Tom. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
You are listening to X-Ray in the Morning with myself, TJ, and Kira. You can text us 971-220-5979, and we'll be back in a bit.